library room at 5:30. We're open to both undergrads and grad students, and it's going to be like a fish-themed game night, kind of. So we're going to have like some fish Pictionary up here on the board. I have a bunch of fish board games. We're going to play some fish trivia. There's going to be food. There's going to be drinks. It'll be fun. You don't have to be interested in fish to come. If you're just like interested in science in general, we encourage you to hang out with us. It's a good opportunity to like meet other science people, interact with grad students. We have a lot of events going on throughout the year too, so it's a good opportunity to learn about like what else is going on with grad students. And if you're interested in running for our executive committee, we'll also be talking about positions that are open as well. So 5:30 tomorrow in this room. See you there. Yay! Thank you. Thank you, Josh.
That's pretty good. Tomorrow night, right?
Giacomo's going to be there. Maybe.
If you beat him at a fish game, you get an A.
I think that other class. No, I might be there, I'm not sure. Tomorrow, Tuesday, maybe. Are there any questions about anything? Is this the phone? Good. So we are going to post this video as soon as we can, and if you think that it's useful, actually we can do it every time. I'm very happy that you're here. I know that it was not, if like me you were out of town since Friday, it's probably not the greatest thing to be here. I extended the time for the paper, and most of you have received that mail. If you had it ready, that's actually great. If you don't, then it bought you another week, so that's good. And we have finally received the results of the exam. They had actually graded it immediately and forgot to send us the results. And so May asked them, and they said, oh yeah, it's right here. So I will post it probably later today or early tomorrow morning. But everybody did really well, so that was great. Are there any questions about anything before I start today's lecture? For whatever reason that I cannot quite explain, when there are fewer students, there is more opportunities to ask questions and things go a little bit less rushed, which makes no sense, but that's just how it is. So anytime you need to stop me, you're welcome to. And today we're going to talk about physiology. So in this second part of the class, second, third, we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about form and function last time. This time we're talking about physiology. And each lecture in many places is the topic of a full course. So there will be so much to talk about. So I try to talk about sort of the highlights of what I think seems important to me as far as that topic is concerned. And so here it's some sort of the best hits, greatest hits about fish physiology. What I mean by that is things that seem interesting and things that are a little bit unique to fishes, but at the same time are general enough so it's interesting even when you are going to go on to other classes. If you are studying birds or mammals or whatever, it seems somewhat interesting. But some things are unique to fishes, and so that also makes it a little bit more relevant to this class. Today we're going to talk about a number of things: buoyancy, respiration, thermal regulation, circulation, osmoregulation. It is actually quite a lot. So I try to be as clear as possible, but sometimes I skip steps because I forgot to mention things. If there is anything you don't understand, always stop me and ask questions. It's really what it's all about. Buoyancy. Fish come in two guises, cartilaginous and bony. The bones are heavier than the cartilage, and as much as fish kind of float in the water, they don't really. They sink. A dead fish that has not been bloated by bacteria actually sinks. A bony fish sinks faster than a cartilaginous one because bones are denser than cartilage. Because of that, fish need some way of being buoyant, otherwise they would all be stuck on the bottom and would spend too much energy trying to stay afloat. So there are a number of ways for fish to stay up in the water column. So they want to maintain their vertical position in the water column. It's potentially energetically costly. Many primitive fishes have lungs. We're going to talk about that in a second. In more advanced lineages, there is no respiratory function. They became a gas bladder. So I'll go now into the two main types of ways of getting into buoyancy, which is either chemical or with gas. And within the gas, there will also be two different types. So first I'm going to talk about the chemical type of buoyancy, and the chemical type of buoyancy comes into two very different groups of fishes. I'll first talk about the first one, which is the cartilaginous fishes. So cartilaginous fishes have one huge advantage over bony fishes, is that cartilage is lighter than bones, and so the buoyancy that they need is not enormous because they don't need to compensate for as much negative weight, let's say. And so the way they do it is not with gas, but with fat. And they have lipids, and particularly they store it in their liver. Pelagic elasmobranchs maintain high levels of low-density lipids in their livers. This week we're going to do some dissections. In your syllabus, it says that today we're going to dissect sharks, and that would have been relevant. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, the sharks were not delivered on time. We learned that yesterday. They were supposed to be delivered this morning, they were not delivered. So we switched the sections. Today we're going to dissect, or this week we're going to dissect bony fishes. Next week we're going to dissect the sharks. So if you came here just because you wanted to dissect sharks, that's a bit of a bummer, but bony fishes are just as interesting. And when you're done with the dissection, you can actually eat them. While the sharks, you can't eat them because they've been injected with preservatives. This one, we spent $300 getting the best possible fishes. Just bring them home and eat them. They're really good. Anyway, elasmobranchs, if you open up a shark, you would be surprised by how much of the shark is liver. In fact, when you open it up, it's kind of confusing because it's just one big mass as is shown in this picture here, and it's just liver. The liver is enormous. There are 3 branches. We will see that when we dissect the shark. And they are full of lipids. And so as much as fat floats a little bit, it's not a huge buoyancy, but it's buoyancy enough to compensate for cartilage, which is not very heavy. 20 to 30% of the body weight is the liver. And the advantage is that it's non-compressible. Unlike gas bladders, that when you go underwater, the pressure of the water squeezes them, and so then they are less buoyant, they provide less buoyancy. Fat is not very compressible, so sharks can go up and down really fast, no big deal. They are always neutrally buoyant. And so that's really nice. They are slightly negative, but not very negative. So it's great for changing depths quickly. However, it is costly to produce. Producing fat is expensive. And however, you can also metabolize it when you're starving. So it is kind of a nice reserve. You see, this is a whale shark that has been cut, and there's this guy that is standing on the liver. That gives you a little bit of the idea of the size of the liver. Here they talk about, there's the oil was absolutely beautiful. A penny toss in a 15-foot deep, 15,000 gallon tank of oil took 5 minutes to hit the bottom, and you could see it all the way down. The oil that you get from the liver is really good. I mentioned before that there used to be a very big fishery for basking sharks, the second largest shark in the world, in the Monterey Bay, and they use the oil for essentially fueling street lights all over the United States. And so this is where it gives you. The cartilage versus bone. The weight of cartilage compared to seawater is 1.1. Instead, the bone is 2. So it means that the cartilage is 55% less dense than bone. Okay, a basking shark that weighs 1,000 kilos in air weighs only 3.3 kilograms in water. So that's the type of weights that you need to compensate with lipids. So it's not that much weight. Very good. So now we're going to talk about gas bladders. Evolutionary speaking, the gas bladder comes from a single origin, which is a modification of the gut. In primitive fishes, the gut is modified into a lung. It's shown here, like in the bottom part of this tree. So here you see the origin of the tree, and in all these guys, which is us, the gut has this appendix on the gut itself, and it turns into a primitive lung in the baby coelacanths, and then it turns into a fatty organ, it fills up with fat. In lungfish, it's actually a real lung. And in the early fish, like the bichnirs, the polypterids that we talked about, they have kind of a lung. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that they go to the surface to get air, and they can get oxygen out of it. But then after that, this extraction from the gut is transformed into a gas bladder. That's some people also call a swim bladder. It's used to regulate the buoyancy, as in some cases it does sound production. We'll talk about it when we talk about perception. And it has a respiratory function for primitive fishes. And as you go deeper underwater, the pressure squeezes the gas, and the gas bladder becomes smaller. As you go up, the gas bladder expands. You may have seen fish either in the fish markets, or if you reel a fish from deep water, if you're a fisherman, you may have seen that the eyes bulge out, and then there is a swim bladder that comes out of the mouth. In both cases, it's not the correct description. What is happening is that the swim bladder is expanding very fast, and it's pushing the stomach out, and it's pushing the eyes out as well. The animals are not dead. It's possible actually to poke the swim bladder, deflate it, and put the fish back very deep. And even in fish that seem completely unrecoverable, they usually do pretty well when you put them back in the water. So if you don't want to keep a fish and the fish is maimed, you can still bring it back down and it works fine. Primitive fishes, this is a bowfin and a gar. They live close to the surface, they gut air, they get air in their stomach, in their guts, and it has the double function of giving them buoyancy and also allowing them to get oxygen out of the air. They live in places where there is very little oxygen. It's very likely that from that situation where the animals were trying to get air, to get oxygen, there was an evolution that considered, let's say if you want to use those terms, that actually you can kill two birds with one stone. You can get oxygen, and at the same time you can get a swim bladder. The problem is that when you do that, you are bound to the surface because you need to gut air, and as you go very deep, you are going to have this air being squeezed by the pressure, and then you lose all the advantage of the buoyancy of the gas bladder. So in the species that have to go to the surface to gut air are usually shallow water species, and They are primitive species. This is why you have two types of gas bladders. These are names that are excellent both for Scrabble and more importantly for the second midterm, because I always ask a question, what are the two types of swim bladders? So you need to write them down. The more primitive swim bladder is a swim bladder. I wonder what this is. Oh. I don't know what this is, but this is not what it's supposed to be. The first type of swim bladder is called the physostomous swim bladder. A physostomous swim bladder is a swim bladder that is derived from the behavior of primitive fishes that are trying to go to the surface, gut air to get oxygen. Because it's really difficult to keep oxygen in the gut, these animals have developed an appendage that is a sac that is connected with the gut, and they can just fill it up, and in some cases they can cinch it and close it. This is it, and this is how it works. This is kind of not a great picture. You have the gut, the mouth is here, the air comes in here, and what they have an appendage with a gas bladder. Oftentimes actually it's in different sections. So instead of just keeping air in the gut itself, they can bring it into another sac, which is a gas bladder, and actually they have a muscle around here that can cinch this pipe, so then they are not constantly burping it out and then losing the advantage of having the gas bladder. This thing here is called the pneumatic duct. It's written right over there, but this is a drawing that makes it a little bit simpler. And here there is this muscle that is a sphincter. I don't know if they show it. And it's a sphincter, it's a muscle that cinches the gas bladder. So they go to the surface, they gut air, they brings it down here, they close it. Then the animal is at the bottom and it's doing fine. It's about okay. When it goes closer to the surface, the swim bladder is going to expand because there is less pressure on it as they are going up. And the sphincter is actually relaxed by something that is called the puck reflex. Puck reflex. It's really easy to remember. It's like puking, but it's a reflex. It's the puck reflex. And so then it opens up, they burp air out, and then they go to the surface, they grab more air, and it goes in. Now that sounds pretty great, it's pretty straightforward. The problem, of course, as I said, is that these animals have to go up to the surface relatively often, and they cannot go very, very deep. So they are shallow water species. In fact, within the gas bladder, a number of them use up the oxygen that is in it, they may as well just use the oxygen, making the gas even less volume of the gas, and so that's not great. It's derived. This is what it looks like. Very often those gas bladders are made out of several chambers. Goldfish have a physostomous swim bladder. Next time you have a goldfish, just open it up and you will see there are actually several chambers that are really beautiful. It's derived as an out pocket from gut. It's vascularized. It retains connection to the gut via the pneumatic duct. Gas enters via gulping or diffusing from the gas line. I'll get to that in a second. Gas exits via the pneumatic duct. Fan control is there. Now, this is not great because of all the drawbacks that I mentioned. So now, instead, what we want is to have a swim bladder that is separate from the guts, so that's the more advanced swim bladder, and then you don't have to go to the surface to fill it up. That's the second type of swim bladder. It doesn't have any of these things. And it's a Physoclistus swim bladder. Physoclistus. So a Physoclistus swim bladder is separate, completely separate from the gut. Now, you are going to have two problems with a Physoclistus swim bladder. Pros. The pro is that you're completely separate from the surface. So you don't have to worry about the surface. You can be a deep sea species, you can be whatever depth, it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with the surface. But the problem is you need to inflate the swim bladder and put gas in it, and then you need to deflate it when you go up. When you go down, you need to inflate it. When you go up, you need to deflate it. As far as I'm concerned, and students may disagree with me about this, however, it's going to be a question in the midterm, so you need to remember this. I consider that inflating the gas bladder is an active action, and deflating the gas bladder is a passive action. And so you will understand in a second why some people say, well, actually it's passive also. Maybe, maybe not. So first, in order for this to work, we need to all understand what is in that swim bladder. Does anyone know what kind of gas is inside the swim bladder? Does anyone know here? What are we going to get in the swim bladder? This is your chance of shining or making a complete fool of yourself. You will not want to pass that. Okay, don't tell anyone, this is going to be a question tomorrow. Come here at 5:30, they will ask what is it. I hope that they will ask that, but I don't know. That would be great. Anyone knows? You can say anything, I've heard it all. I hope. No idea whatsoever. Go ahead.
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen is the most common guess, and it makes a lot of sense that that's not nitrogen. What do you think? Oxygen. Who thinks it's oxygen? One other person. Three. 3 people are right. 4 people are right. Guys, this is a really bad test right there. It is oxygen. Okay, now that we know what is in it, and everybody else thought it was something else, and they didn't dare say what it was. Shame on you. You missed an opportunity to say something. So now what we need is to inflate that thing. How are we going to get oxygen into this thing? Does anyone know how we're going to get oxygen into this thing? Go ahead. Through the gills. It is a fact that oxygen ultimately comes through the gills. So the oxygen comes in here. Okay, we have that step, that's fine. So the animal is actually breathing, so it has oxygen. That is true, we're going to see that in the action. However, then we need to go from here to here. Go ahead.
Blood.
Through the blood. Okay, so we have the second aspect, which is correct. So here, there is a very vascularized area, and this vascularized area is gorgeous. It is so beautiful. It is called the wonderful net. However, wonderful net doesn't seem very scientific, so it's actually translated into Latin. Rete means net, and then mirabile means wonderful. Rete mirabile. So this stuff here is a very vascularized area. It's called rete mirabile, wonderful net. That's how it's inflated. Now, okay, that sounds great, but how do you put, it's vascularized, why would oxygen go inside here? There is one more element to know. So the oxygen comes in from the water, it's breathed, it goes into the blood. There is a lot of oxygen here in this rete mirabile, it's very vascularized. But I mean, okay, why would it go inside the swim bladder? Does anyone know how you would do that? Go ahead.
If the pressure was lower in the swim bladder, then it would flow in.
You're right. So that's true, but how could it possibly be lower? Let's say the fish is going down. So the pressure of the oxygen in the fish and in the swim bladder is actually the same. Yet, you're right. Somehow, the pressure in here is lower than in the blood. Or rather, in the retiniramidine. How can we do that? You're right, and this is why there is a bit of a semantic argument where this might be, so here there's a little bit like molecules of oxygen are going like this. And so it is diffusion. However, it's not exactly passive as far as I'm concerned, because if you put a dead fish in the water, oxygen is not going to flow in. However, oxygen will go out if you bring the fish up, even if the fish is dead. So this is passive. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm going to give you the answer, because unless someone wants to guess. So there is a thing that is called the Bohr effect. I don't know if you remember this from some Bohr and root effect. When there is low pH, that is, there is acidity, hemoglobin has a lower affinity for oxygen. That's what the Bohr effect is. And what the animal does is that it produces hormones, and actually it produces lactic acid that goes on here, and the pH is lowered in the retiniramidine. Because the pH is lowered, oxygen is taken out of the blood, and locally, what you said was exactly right. Locally, the partial pressure of oxygen goes up, and so by being higher here, there is less oxygen in the swim bladder, and it's going to diffuse in it. Because locally, in the retiniramidine, the partial pressure of oxygen is going to go up, and then it goes inside here. So that's kind of a cool system. It's also a really interesting system, because if the animal needs oxygen to breathe, it can actually capture it from the swim bladder. It's a repository of oxygen, so that's great. So incidentally, for example, when people, I don't know if you've ever seen those shows, but I do watch those shows, sadly, of people fishing for big fish like those marlins and stuff like that, and they are fighting with them for hours and hours. Eventually the animal is half dead, it's all passed out. The reason why the animal is tired is not because the fisherman is amazing, it's because they've been fighting, and the muscles produce lactic acid, and lactic acid reduces the capability for hemoglobin to store oxygen. They lose the oxygen and they are choking. These animals are actually choking. That's why they stop swimming. That's not because the fisherman is amazing. So that's a little bit the same concept. When the animal goes up, oxygen needs to get out. Now it's going to be a little bit different, easier, because now the pressure inside the swim bladder is higher than the outside. And actually it can simply diffuse out, and there is an area here that is somewhat similar to this but not nearly as spectacular, and this one is simply called the oval. It's an organ that is called the oval because of its shape, obviously, and that's it, it's the oval. So in this area, which is vascularized as well but not nearly as much as this, the swim bladder expands, but it's held by the body itself, and so the partial pressure is higher, and it goes out in the oval into the bloodstream, and then it goes out nicely. Now the fish goes up slowly, and it's doing fine. If you reel the fish in really fast, the oval cannot take as much oxygen. The oxygen cannot diffuse fast enough into the oval, and that's why the swim bladder bulges out, and the eyes pop out and stuff. That's how it works. That's it. So the gas gland is called the retiniramidine. That's the same thing over there. And then you have the oval over there. That is the place where the oxygen goes back out. Sure, same thing. Oh, oval, they put an A, yeah. Oval, there you go. Oval. The Physoplystis swim bladder, which is a more advanced swim bladder, is sealed off from the guts. There is no pneumatic duct. The gas enters and exits via blood, gas gland, and oval. The excess gas is offloaded via the gills, somewhat, and it's found in more direct arterial groups. There are some species that are slightly intermediate between these two species. Is the case, for example, of eels. In the case of freshwater eels, you have a physostomous swim bladder. However, as much as you have a pneumatic duct and a gas bladder, you still have a little bit of a rete mirabile and an oval. They don't work nearly as much, but as you can imagine, it's not that you went from one type of swim bladder to the other directly, and so there are some species that are slightly intermediate. The gas gland and the rete mirabile, okay, it's inflated by diffusion, so this is where there are discussions about exactly how it works. As far as I am concerned, I consider that this inflation, as much as it is due to diffusion, ultimately it is diffusion. However, the fish is actively lowering the pH to be able to put oxygen into the swim bladder. This is what to show you what the bore and root effects are. This is where when you have lower pH, there is less affinity for oxygen, and the oxygen is removed from the hemoglobin. Very good. We are not going to, I don't want to, okay, all this, I have said all this, very good. If you are interested, you can read all these things. Fine. I think that I mentioned already all these things. I mentioned that sharks and rays, chondrichthyans in general, use chemical for buoyancy, which is the fat in their liver. There are some bony fishes that use fat for buoyancy as well, and this is the case of fishes that used to have a swim bladder, through evolution lost their swim bladder, and later on regained buoyancy, regained a pelagic lifestyle, which means a lifestyle that is not on the bottom. And that's the case of 3 groups of Antarctic fishes. And actually there is a few other species that do that. The more famous ones are the Antarctic pelagics. There are a couple of other species that do that. If you're interested, we can talk about it, but there are really very particular cases. The way it works is that in order for fish to enter very cold Antarctic waters, they had to essentially crawl on the bottom. I won't go into the details of why this is, just take my word for it. They had to go through the bottom. And so because there were benthic species that were on the bottom, they didn't have a use for a swim bladder, and all Antarctic species of fish lack a swim bladder. They do not have a swim bladder. However, once they were in the Antarctic, and there is tens, if not hundreds of species, they realized looking up that there was a lot of food that was available, and it was kind of silly to stay on the bottom. And so some species went back up in the water column, and for those species to go up in the water column, they did not evolve a new swim bladder. Instead, they started accumulating fat in their bodies. And unlike sharks that have fat in their livers, those guys have fat in their muscles. The 3 main groups of fishes. At the top, there are what are called Antarctic sardines. In the middle, there are what are called Antarctic toothfish, and at the bottom, they are just called borks for their scientific name. The middle one is pretty famous because on fish markets is sold as Chilean sea bass. I don't know if has anyone here ever tried Chilean sea bass? Some people say yes, good. Chilean sea bass is excellent. Do not ever eat it because it's an endangered species. It's usually caught illegally and their survival is very precarious. However, now that you've tried it, don't you agree with me that they are amazing? The reason why they're really good is because they're full of fat, and so they're considered the perfect fish. There is a great book called The Perfect Fish that talks about people chasing illegal fishermen that are catching Chilean sea bass in Australian waters. It's a little bit like, I can't remember the name of the guy that is on the big boat of Greenpeace and is shooting whalers and stuff. It's like this, but 10 times better because it's fish. So it's really cool. It's a great, great book. It's called The Perfect Fish. Anyway, the reason why it's called The Perfect Fish is because it's very good to eat, and also because it has so much fat, you can freeze it, and when you thaw it, it's just as good as when it's fresh. So it's a really great animal. The first toothfish, they're called Chilean sea bass, but the real name is toothfish. The first toothfish that was ever caught by a scientist was caught by a professor at UC Santa Cruz that is now retired. His name is John Pierce. And the way he caught it was really crazy. He works on sea urchins and was diving in the Antarctic. And so he went on a dive, and then he came out of the dive through the hole, and they have a hut. They bring a hut, they tow a hut behind the skidoo. They put the hut on top of the hole so they don't freeze when they come out of the water. And they came out of the water and they were just eating their sandwiches and hot coffee to try to warm up a little bit. And a seal came out of the hole to breathe with a toothfish in its mouth. And so they grabbed the toothfish, and that was the first one that was caught and described. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. No. There we go. Benthic, okay, I said all these things, I'm sure. Very good. Now we're going to talk about respiration. So, I don't know, yeah. So this is water now. Water is coming in and they're getting oxygen through the gills. How do fish get oxygen in their body? The problem with water is that it has very little oxygen in it. And so, getting oxygen out of the water is very, very difficult, but fish are pretty good at it. Things to consider. Water contains less oxygen than air, 1% as opposed to 20%. There is 20% of oxygen in the air. For those of you who have not thought about it, there is not that much oxygen in the air, but still quite a lot more than in water. Seawater holds 25% oxygen than fresh water, and it's due to the salts. And oxygen is lowest in warm marine environments. Warm water holds less oxygen. If the water gets very warm, you know that fish in small tanks tend to die because there is less oxygen. High density and viscosity means that more energy is required to simply move water across the respiratory surfaces. I don't know if I will say it later, so I may as well just say it now before I forget. In the Antarctic, because the water is very, very cold, there are some fish that actually can get oxygen out of the water without having any hemoglobin. It's the only vertebrates without hemoglobin. These are called ice fishes, and there's enough oxygen. Actually, iron is very depauperate in Antarctic waters, so they don't need to have hemoglobin, and they can actually diffuse oxygen in their bodies. But these are very particular cases. All the other fishes have hemoglobin just like you and I. There are two main types of ways of getting water through your gills. And they are similar to what I said when I talked about feeding, because the feeding and respiration are coupled. There is suction feeding and suction respiration. That's the same, essentially the same thing. These are animals with large mouth, such as this cabezon here, and they have those big bellows under their mouth, and they can pump water. They don't move much, and they're constantly pumping water through their gills. Because there is very little oxygen in water, the water goes through gills, which are very thin, vascularized tissues, and the surface of the gills is huge. In some large fish, the gill surface might be as large as a tennis court. So, because there's so little oxygen, you need to have a very, very large area in contact with water. Alternatively, for ram feeders, you have ram respiration. These are animals such as barracudas, sharks, and so on. They swim really fast. Their gill openings are completely open to water that is circulating through it. They need actually a lot of oxygen because they're swimming very fast, and they are ramming water through their mouth. Incidentally, to this day, we don't know how large schools of fish can live with the last guys in the back not passing out. People have yet to understand how it's possible, because in very large schools, the first individuals get all the oxygen, and so they don't understand how the last guys can do it. It's an open question. So picture. This is a better picture. I'm not very much into cars, but apparently this is also called ram whatever, for this kind of Corvettes or whatever. These are the ram feeders as well as the ram respirators. There is all the branchiostegal ways are actually all tucked under the gill covers. The gills are very developed and very open like this, and the water constantly flows through it. These guys, that we talked about it when we talked about feeding, but they are constantly pumping water through their mouth. This is what the gills look like. When we're going to dissect the fish, we're going to look at the gills. Gills are very efficient at extracting oxygen from water, and they have a high surface area. As much as all this is correct, the problem is that you still have so little oxygen in the water that you really need to maximize the way you're going to get this oxygen out. The way fish do it is by using what is called a counter-current exchange. And this is the way it goes. For whatever reason, it's not completely straightforward to explain, but I'm going to try to do my best to explain it. First of all, you have to understand that oxygen goes from the water into the blood by passive movement. It's a difference in partial pressure. If there is a lot of oxygen in one liquid and little oxygen in the other liquid, oxygen will diffuse from one place to another. And so you have two options. Either when the fish is swimming or ventilating its gills, the water flows in the same direction as the blood, and that is the upper drawing. So this means that as the water is at the I think that the way it's kind of represented is that the bottom one is the water and the top one is the blood. So if they flow in the same direction, at the beginning water has 100% oxygen and there is no oxygen in the blood. They flow in the same direction, and as oxygen is entering the bloodstream, the difference in pressure between the water and the blood is getting smaller and smaller, and at the end they reach about 50-50, and then eventually the water flows out, and then the blood can reach only that much, because at the beginning you have this huge increase in oxygen, and as it goes, the difference in pressure is lower and lower. In a countercurrent system, which is the case of fishes, fishes have a countercurrent system, the water is flowing in this direction, and the blood is flowing in this direction here. So at all times, there is the largest possible differential in amount of oxygen. Because as the oxygen is being depleted from the water, it is encountering blood that has very little oxygen, and it encounters blood that has less and less oxygen. And as much as there is less and less oxygen in the water, there is still a gradient in partial pressure of oxygen that makes it such that you get as much oxygen as possible in the blood out of the water. That's how it works, kind of. Not kind of, but that's how it works. And if you're better than me at understanding than me at explaining it, then you got it. That's the idea. The only proper analogy that I found was that I don't know if it's really a proper analogy, but I tend to wash, when I wash dishes, my dishwasher is broken. It's been broken for three weeks, and I wash the dishes again, and that sucks. So I first start washing glasses, which are less dirty than the pans. And so you wash with clean water the glasses, and then at the end you wash the pans with water that is not nearly as gross, but it's still cleaner than the pans. Kind of. That's a countercurrent exchange right there. I said, how would fish clean the dishes? That's how they do it. You know, this is drawings that show you how they do it in super things. Just do